Small business war stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes. Hey, lovers of small businesses and good stories in general. Welcome to episode 93 of Small Business War Stories. And today, I kind of indulged myself. And I interviewed this guy, Austin Peterson, who is the founder of Blackout Traders. And the reason I say indulge myself is because when I was a little kid in Chile growing up, I loved these old Toyota. They were called Land Cruisers there. Here in the U.S., they're called FJ40s. They're these kind of boxy, square, Jeep-like Toyotas that are just awesome. And I currently drive out to an FJ Cruiser because I love it. It's kind of a modern redux of those. In any case, Austin has a company in right in the design district of Dallas that started by refurbishing these really cool vintage Toyotas, and now they're actually making them from the ground up. And I had the opportunity to visit their shop and see what they're doing. And what's really cool about this episode, we talk a little bit about cars, but there's a lot of stuff that's really applicable to everybody in small business. We talk a lot about online advertising. Austin has become an expert in online advertising, and he gives a lot of really practical, applicable tips about how to succeed with Google Adwords and what to do with that. I learned quite a bit, and I think you will as well. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode with Austin Peterson of Blackout Traders in Dallas, Texas. And we are live here in the Dallas Design District. And today I have the pleasure and honor to sit down with Austin Peterson, who is the founder of Blackout Traders. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. It's really cool to be here. And we were talking before about I grew up in Chile, and a lot of there's actually like different cars altogether than there are in the U.S., right? Like like the production lines are different. And I grew up kind of looking up to these Toyota 4x4s, right? The Land Cruisers or FJ40s, depending on where you are. And what you do here, or it's evolved over time. We'll talk a little bit, but you start restoring them, and now you're kind of custom fabricating these vehicles, right?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny that you mentioned Chile, because what really got me into these trucks in the first place was over the years I started a few companies. One of those was a coffee company, and I would travel all around South America to get coffee beans and try and find fair trade coffee. And I just loved South America. I loved going up in the mountains and everything and visiting the fincas, and it was always just such an amazing experience for me. And I wasn't really like heavily into coffee that much, I mean, I drink it just because I have to, because it keeps me awake or whatever, but I've never been into the coffee culture that much. But I love the outdoors, and I was huge into the off-roading culture. And I mean, people think they off-road here in the United States, but you don't know anything about off-roading until you go to South America, man. They do some crazy stuff.
Yep.
And
a lot of times in South America, off-roading is not really a leisure activity. It's just a necessity because the road's just not that good.
Exactly, man. And we'd go up and down these crazy roads, and the only truck that could get up and down the mountains was a Land Cruiser. And they'd pile thousands of pounds of coffee in the back, and they'd pile like 15 people on the truck. And I was just blown away by these things and really just fell in love with the culture of the vehicle, right? These trucks are all over the world, and they've kind of done battle with the environment and with the people there, and they're a huge part of the ecosystem for these people, right? Yep. I mean, it's like you said, it's the only thing that can kind of get them from point A to point B when the roads really just, the infrastructure's not there.
Yeah, and it's kind of like part of the big three so there's Jeeps, Land Rovers, and Toyota Land Cruisers, and those are kind of like the big three of like off-road overland vehicles, right? And around the world. Yeah,
so in the industry, there's those three. Then there's Broncos and Scouts and stuff like that. But those three are really the more international
Right.
vehicle, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't really find Broncos anywhere else besides the United States.
I've never seen a Bronco until I moved to the U.S.
Yeah,
I don't
so
even think they're sold.
they definitely have more of a global appeal.
Yeah.
And that's part of what intrigued me about them as well. I actually honestly never knew what a Land Cruiser was until one of my old bosses
Yeah.
was just crazy about them. And he sat right behind me so he could see everything I was doing all day long on my computer.
Yep.
So the only thing that I could do outside of work was like Google Toyota Land Cruisers and get away with it, right? So that's kind of how I got into it. And then I had the coffee company and I was traveling all over South America and kind of fell in love with them there.
Cool. Awesome. And how long ago did you start Black Dog Traders?
It's been about 6 years now.
6 years. Okay, cool. And you started originally taking like basically supply of what you call donor cars. So you gave me we are in a fabrication facility here, so there will be some sounds and noises coming from the shop floor. That's behind the office where we are now. And you walked me around. You showed me what you call a donor vehicle, which is so what was this process originally of finding these donor vehicles and starting to restore them, and then how has the shop evolved over time? Because what you do today is a little different, right?
Oh man, it's honestly, I never would have imagined that we would be where we are now when we first started. When I first started this, really it was almost like a hobby.
Yeah.
I would buy these trucks and fix them up a little bit and then sell them. And when I first started, we were selling them for $15,000, $20,000, $25,000, and I wasn't even making money on them. Honestly, I wasn't making any money. We just did it because we liked it, and I wanted to kind of get into the industry, and figure out more about these cool trucks that I liked. And it went from me just tinkering with them to working with the shop and doing a little bit more of a restoration, to eventually just getting into full-on frame-off restorations where we spend thousands of hours on these vehicles. And it's crazy, the type of stuff.
What does for people who may not know, what is a frame-off restoration?
So there's different ways of doing it. People would classify it as different things, but basically you take the truck down and deconstruct it all the way down to the frame, individual nuts and bolts, and then completely rebuild it. Normally what you would do is you would rebuild it in raw metal and mock it up so that everything's perfect. You can line up the factory panels and gaps, tolerances, and once you have everything perfect and it's built, you then take it all apart again and it goes to body and paint and all the finishing details and gets put back together.
So you do a dry fit first and then finish and then put it back
Everything's
together.
dry fit. That's
Wow.
the most important part.
Yeah.
If you skip
with guitars building, it's the same thing.
Yeah, if you skip that step, you'll end up with guys dragging wrenches across the paint and stuff. Like, you just end up with all kinds of little issues that you wouldn't have found otherwise. Your panel gaps won't be right, things like that. So really, a major part of the restoration, a major part of quality control is making sure that everything's perfect during that mock-up stage. And then we blast it all apart again and rebuild it. But that's when we were doing restorations. We moved away from that, and really what we're doing now is completely different. So
you no longer do any restorations?
We do sometimes, but it's on a case-by-case basis. If we have a customer who really wants one, we'll take it in and do it for them. But now, really, they're completely brand new vehicles. They're custom built by hand here at the shop.
So you're basically making handmade cars.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised what goes into it. Honestly, it's one.
Well, talk me through it. What happened?
So, really, these vehicles evolved from all my frustrations with the Land Cruisers. We'd restore them and everything would be perfect and it'd look amazing, but I'd drive it and I would be like on the highway just getting passed by everybody, and my dad would get in the car and he wouldn't be able to fit in it because the seats aren't adjustable and things like that, that I just really wasn't happy with. I love the original vehicle, but I feel like it just needs to be modernized. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think it's a shame that Toyota doesn't do it themselves.
What do you mean?
I think there'd be a huge market for Toyota if they built the original spec Land Cruiser, but modernized it.
Sort of what Volkswagen did with the Beetle, where they relaunched it.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the new Beetle, but they actually made up until I don't know if they still do, but they were making in Mexico like the old spec Beetle.
Yeah, and they launched the FJ Cruiser, which you drive,
Yep.
which is an amazing vehicle as well, but it just is not really.
They discontinued that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they stopped. They made it, I think, for about 8 years. I want to say 8-9 years, and then they stopped making it.
But basically, now what we do is we take the trucks in. We get, for the most part, 90% of our customers go with an aluminum body, so it's a thick gauge aluminum. It's really, really high quality product. It's very expensive, but it's amazing.
How much more expensive is aluminum than steel as a raw material?
I'm not sure about the raw material costs, but I know that just, for me to get an entire truck out of steel, I can find it for a third of the price.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, but aluminum is much stronger and much lighter.
It has different properties, but it's much lighter because of the thickness of this aluminum. It's going to be stronger. The only thing about aluminum is that it is not as malleable as steel.
It's hard to repair. Right?
Yeah, it can be hard to repair. But we've got plenty of panels for all that if there ever was any issue, which nobody's had any issues with it. But yeah, so sorry, I keep wandering off.
No. We were talking about the build process. You're hand making cars. This is not simple.
Yeah, so each build takes anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 hours typically. What that involves is we bring the frame in. We start working on the frame. Frames get anywhere from 40 to 60 hours of work where we box the frame in, we strengthen it.
So you don't make the frame. You take the frame off another vehicle?
Yeah, so we actually use Toyota Land Cruiser frames,
okay,
and they're titled as a 1978, 1981 Toyota Land Cruiser. But that frame goes through so much once it gets here that it's a brand new frame by the time we're done with it.
Is that important that it has a title? I mean, how does that work?
It honestly doesn't make a huge difference. What it allows us to do is it allows us to put in more horsepower and things like that you could pass off without having to be EPA compliant. Although we go the extra mile anyways, and all of our vehicles are 100% EPA compliant. So it doesn't make a huge difference. Okay. In the next few years, we'll probably phase that out and build our own frames in-house.
Okay.
But for now, we're just going with the original frames, and we spend at least 40 to 60 hours working on those frames to get them strengthened, adding cross members, and honestly, we put as much work into the frames as we do all the body work. The frames are gorgeous.
Wow. Yeah, no, I saw it. You had one out there, the one you showed me, and the axles. And you also showed me some of the engines. You're using GM engines, right?
Yeah, so we use brand new crate motors from GM. We originally tried going with Toyota engines, but it was just a huge nightmare trying to source down parts and things like that. And I had customers always asking me, well, what if something happens to my truck, 5 years from now, or what if I need to get it maintained, right? Like, it's getting harder and harder to find people that know how to work on that stuff. And even if it's just a simple part, sometimes a Toyota part can take 3 weeks to get there, a month to get there.
You mean an old Toyota
Even
part?
Some of the newer stuff.
Really?
Yeah. But with these GM engines, if you went anywhere in the world, you'd be able to find parts for it. And everybody knows how to work on them.
Okay. And so your restorations, were they carbureted or were they fuel injected?
It just depended on what the customer wants. We had models with both.
Okay, but now these, I presume, are fuel injected.
These are all fuel injected. These are all brand new, either LS3s or LSA motors. The LS3s put out 430 horsepower, and
That's a lot.
LSAs put out 556.
That's ridiculous. Isn't that like about what a Corvette does?
It's actually a Corvette motor, yeah.
Yeah. So you put Corvette motors into like hand-built Toyota clones.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we take tons of time to make sure that these trucks are comfortable, that they're as safe as they can be. We put modern Willwood brake systems on them.
Yeah.
We put 4 different coatings on the interior and also on the undercarriage so that it is sound deadened and it's insulated from radiant heat from the motor and the transmission. And then the final coating that we put on is a bed liner type material.
Yeah. Like Line-X or Raptor liners.
It's Raptor liner, yeah. It's a little bit thinner than Line-X, and we like it for interior just because it's not as hard or harsh on everything, you know?
Yep.
And it lays down nicer. It looks a lot nicer.
I was actually considering refinishing my car in Raptor liner.
It looks good, yeah. It lays on almost like paint.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just build these trucks for a purpose, right? Like they're all built to be used either as a daily driver or for off-roading or on your ranch.
Yeah.
And the last thing that I want is someone to be wearing a pair of muddy boots and worry about getting back into his truck because he's going to scratch the paint on the floor, you know?
Right.
So little details like that is really what kind of separates us from most other companies that are out there.
And you have 3 different trims or 3 different types of cars that you sell, right? One of them's a daily driver. And then you have also, I saw one that's more off-road and one that's like hardcore, crazy.
Yeah.
What percentage of people get which one, and what are the differences?
You know, it's really, I would say most people stray towards the outdoorsman, but a lot of people are interested in the hunter, and then the daily driver is number 3.
Really?
Yeah.
I would have thought the daily driver would have been more popular.
No. Yeah, I mean, but it really just depends on what you want to do with the vehicle, right? I mean, they were built for specific purposes. The daily driver is for nights out on the town, commuting to work, you know, taking your wife or your significant other out, throwing kids in the back if you want. You know, we have seating options for that. The outdoorsman is built more for somebody who wants a little bit of both. Wants to be able to go out and off-road. I mean, all these trucks, don't get me wrong, they're all capable.
Yeah.
Extremely capable. The daily driver can handle just about anything you can throw at it, but it's not purpose-built for that.
Yeah.
And then
the gears are probably different, right? The torque on it and stuff?
No, we gear everything so that it's comfortable on highway and off-road, but it's just, you know, it doesn't come with air lockers. The axles are a little bit different. And basically just all the little creature comforts and stuff are designed for more of like a city life.
Yeah.
And then the hunter is just for somebody who wants something crazy.
Yeah. Crazy hardcore. And I don't know, are you at liberty to talk about your price ranges on the show?
Yeah, that's fine. You know, I get asked this question all the time. Our prices start at $120 for the daily driver.
Yep.
The outdoorsman is $150, and the hunter is $200,000.
So it's basically like a Lamborghini type pricing for a 4x4 vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like you said, it's all hand built here in the United States. But 1,000 to 2,000 hours of craftsmanship, and the best parts that you can find.
Yeah.
I mean, Atlas transfer cases, all the stuff that we have in these is bulletproof, and it's been tested over 20, 30 years by off-roaders. It's just all high quality.
Yeah. So would you ever consider making your own designs?
Yeah, I'd love to do that, actually.
Yeah.
That's something that I think is maybe 3 to 5 years away.
Okay.
I really want to just get to the point where we've turned this into such an efficient machine that I can pump out 100 of them or 200 of them a year if I wanted to.
How many are you making now?
We do about 10 to 20 a year right now.
Okay. So about 1 to 2 a month.
Yeah. And it takes anywhere from 6 to 9 months to build one. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'd like to get it to where we can build 100 or 200 of them, and eventually I'll move into, you know, either a 60 series or a Bronco or something else.
What is the 60 series?
A 60 series Land Cruiser.
Okay.
It's they started production in 1981 on those.
It's kind of for listeners who may not be as familiar. It's kind of more like a wagon, sort of longer shape, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's more of like an SUV type.
What years were these Land Cruisers, the boxy ones that you're patterning and everything? Like, what years were they made? They were 60s to early 80s or something like that?
It's late 50s to
Late 50s.
83.
83.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you, I mean, this may be an obvious or dumb question, but do you have any, like, trademark issues with you selling vehicles that look exactly like a shape that is a Toyota vehicle or not?
No, not at all. And part of that is that they are actually registered and everything as a Toyota Land Cruiser.
You just restoring them?
Yeah.
Right.
But there's a few other people out there doing this, and it's never been an issue for anyone.
Okay. Interesting. And what kind of things would you, I mean, there's a deeper question here about American manufacturing, period, right? So I think you're seeing a lot of foreign car companies that are starting to make more cars here in the U.S. If you're talking about starting to do your own designs and about talking about expanding and turning, you know, when you're showing me the floor, you're telling me that every day you're going more towards having a production line. So what does it mean to, I mean, you're essentially, like, reading through the lines here, in between the lines, you're sort of starting a car company in some ways, right? I mean, it is obviously a car company, but you're going beyond like the one-off fabrication into something potentially much bigger. So
Yeah.
How do you think about that?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, what we're doing right now is honestly the same thing that they're doing over at like Bugatti and all these larger custom car companies, right? We're just doing it with 4x4s, and there aren't that many people doing it with 4x4s.
That's right.
The market is expanding, but we're still one of the first couple to be doing it seriously. I think that'll change over time as SUVs get more and more popular.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's really just getting all this perfected and then figuring out how to really, like you said, turn it into a production line and make everything way more efficient.
Yeah.
And then once we get to that point where I feel comfortable enough that we could pump out, you know, like I said, 100 or 200 of them if we needed to, then
Yeah.
we'll scale up to something different.
So it's like 10x your size right now.
Yeah.
What is your timeline, what your vision for you when you want to do that?
I would like to be able to be building, in 2 years, I would say like 40 of them a year, and then scale up to 60 or 80.
Wow, you got your work cut out for you.
It's a lot of work, man.
Yeah.
It's 24 hours a day.
Thanks for taking the time to sit down here. I mean,
Hey, man, well, you're right here in my house, in my church,
yeah,
bud.
exactly. And you're actually building a really cool brand. So right behind you, our listeners can't see, but there's an eagle on top of a wrench, and then you also have the Black Dog Trader's name, and you have some really cool design ethic elements, and you have some hats and wallets and things like that. So tell me more about what's going into the thinking with the branding of all this.
Well, I think that the way that people attach themselves emotionally to a company is through a brand, right? And this is honestly my heart and my soul, and I put all my effort and time and energy into this.
Yeah.
And I feel blessed because I love doing it. I love every second of it. But this is just my expression of what it is that we're doing, and something that I think people can emotionally attach to, basically.
Yeah.
I'd like to start producing leather goods and things like that. We've got a few wallets that we produce, but it's at this point it's really just in its infancy.
Yeah.
When I get a little bit more time, I want to start producing more stuff like that. Really, just anything that has some sort of craftsmanship involved in it.
It reminds me of GoRuck a little bit. You know GoRuck?
Mm-hmm.
They make that pack right there. Jason McCarthy, I've known him since he started it in 2009, 2010. I had him on the show, actually. You should listen to that episode. And he just published a couple days ago basically like a state of his business where he talks about the evolution of his business. And there's some parallels. I mean, obviously, backpacks and cars are a little different, but the American manufacturing, the building of the brand, the emotional connection.
Yeah, I would love to partner with someone like that on something eventually. I mean, I think that, like you said, there's a lot of parallels in it, and a lot of the reason why we started doing wallets is a lot of these trucks there's a lot of leather involved, there's a lot of upholstery involved, right? It's all just craftsmanship, and
It's a great idea, actually. The wallet I'm currently carrying is I interviewed Goodwood NOLA, which is a wood fabrication shop in New Orleans. They make wood and metal high-end furniture, and they started making these as well. And they gave it to me when we were when I had a episode with them, Michael and Jordan. Hey guys, if you guys are listening, yeah, and they're awesome. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of commonality there with like the branding of those. And you sell these on your website, right? The T-shirts and all that time.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. For people who are not yet in a position to be able to afford a $120,000 Cool. So let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges you face. Like, can you think of a time that things went really wrong, and what did you do about it?
Yeah, so when I first started the company, I just dove in headfirst and submersed myself in all this. And it's like I told you, I wasn't really making any money. I was selling the trucks for way less than I should have been. Yep. And I was really just trying to figure out where do I fit in this market, And it got to the point where I had trucks that I had built and sold, and at one point I was actually like dipping into my own money to build these trucks because I didn't realize I dug into it and I started building them, and then my perfectionism just took over, and I was like, no, we're not going to use this part. We're just going to buy a brand new part and use that instead. It'll be a much better truck in the end. And what ended up happening is I was building trucks that were just way more expensive than what I sold them for.
Yeah.
And I had to sell my own truck and do all these things to get out of that. But, it was a huge learning lesson.
Yeah. You were losing money by making it up in volume?
I was, yeah, exactly. And then we switched to the opposite approach. Yeah. I'd like to switch back to volume eventually, but I want to make sure that everything's perfect and that we're not sacrificing anything by doing that, which is why we only build 10 to 20 a year.
Yeah, that's an old joke that you lose money, so you do more of it, which ends up meaning you lose more money. Okay, so what was that process? How did you fix that? How did you notice? Okay, this is not going to be a business. It's going to be a. How did you basically transition from money pit hobby to profitable business? Yeah,
well, I mean, so. It's one of those things when you first enter any market, right? You kind of have to undersell a little bit, which I sold way too much. But you have to, in order to just get your first few customers, right, and then use them as like test cases, use them as your testimonials and things like that. Get good photos and everything else. So that's a part of building any business, I think. But really, I just focused 100% on building up the company, building up the brand, and that allowed me to raise my prices enough that I could afford to, open up a bigger shop and kind of grow out of that issue.
Yeah. How do you scale American manufacturing with like the labor issues and competitive? I mean, going back, I wanted to close the loop on that. We talked about it earlier about American manufacturing. How do you do that? How do you compete with like cheaper, offshore labor? How do you compete with maybe sometimes cheaper offshore materials and delivering a product that is made here in the U.S. in a way that's competitive? And how does that project forward?
So it's a good question because it's a problem that everyone in my industry faces. It's a huge one. Yeah. Any American manufacturing has that issue. And for our industry specifically, there's a lot of companies or just individuals overseas that will build these trucks, and they'll kind of build them, I don't know if the word should be said on podcast, but half-ass.
Mm-hmm. You can cuss.
Yeah, and then they'll ship them to the United States and sell them way underpriced. And I get people all the time that will come back to me that have already done that, right? Like I had this guy 6 months ago, and he had talked to me a year ago, and he told me it was too expensive, and then he went and bought his own truck from Colombia, and he came back to me, and he was like, hey, man, like I thought it would be cute and go and buy this FJ 43 from Colombia, and I paid $25,000 for it, and I hate it. Like, It's falling apart. I can't get it to drive down the highway. Can you fix it for me and give me a credit on your truck for this truck that I'm giving you? I'm like, no. Sorry, man. That's not how it works. But really, the way that you compete with any sort of business like that is just finding where their strengths and weaknesses are and where your strengths and weaknesses are. Normally, their strength is really just price. And in order to effectively battle price, you have to educate your customer. And you also have to just build a strong brand and a strong company ethos and stand behind all of it. And offer things like a warranty or guarantee, really the main thing is just educating the consumer.
Yeah.
Because, it's like you said, anybody could go down and buy that product from China or from wherever, and it might be a third or even a fifth of the price, but it's not going to last 20 years, 40 years.
I have 2 of Jason's backpacks that are all made in the U.S., and they've been my main backpack, my only backpacks for 7, 8 years now, and they've gone around the globe. I just took this one to the bottom of the Grand Canyon 3 weeks ago. And it makes a difference when things are well built. Yeah,
and people don't realize the difference between the cost of labor overseas. It's literally 10 times cheaper, or sometimes in some cases even more. It's insane.
Yeah.
It really is. And these guys are working there, and they're making $300 a month working full time.
Wow. How do you find your customers? So let's talk a little bit about, so the price point is not that many people can afford a car that starts at $120,000. How do you find your customers? Do they find you? And how do you, over time, as you scale this, presumably you would also start offering things that are less than $120,000, which would be part of the goal, right? And like appeal to a broader audience. But given what your audience is today, how do you find these people?
So, just for anybody that's out there trying to start their own business, social media, if you have the time to really put into it, is a great way to bootstrap and get your first few customers. And we did that. That's how we started out.
Yeah, you do a great job with social media, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, I really used to focus on it a lot, but now I just don't have the time. And I want to get to the point where I can focus on it again because I love it. It's really just a great way to express your brand and have a company face and show what you're doing. But once we moved past that and we had a little bit of money to use on advertising, we focus on social media and all of our subscribers and our email lists, but we also do paid advertising.
Okay. Where do you advertise?
Facebook and Google.
Okay. You don't do like trade magazines or anything like that?
Not typically. Okay. The reason why I don't is that for me, I like to see where my money is going and see what I'm getting out of it. Mm-hmm. And I take a very analytical approach to advertising. And I like testing and with print or anything like that, it's really hard to measure the result. And it's also hard to see what's going on, right? I love being able to dig into my paid media accounts and just go through all the numbers and figure out what's going on, tweak this and see if it changes that. You know, with print, there's a huge hole in the feedback loop that you don't really get.
Let's talk about that. So it's really important, I think, for a lot of small businesses to some of the stuff can seem really intimidating to small businesses, right? To spend time on these things that seem kind of black boxy, and but really it's not, right? It's just kind of a simple equation, like math problem. And it probably took, how long did it take you to really understand online advertising? It probably took you some trial and error, right?
It all is trial and error. So, the only way to learn any of this stuff is to just do it.
Yeah.
You can read all day long about it. You're never going to understand it until you open up your own Google AdWords account or your own Facebook ads account.
Yeah.
And you start spending a little bit of money there. And you can start with, $100, $200 just to see how it works and see what the results are. But people are scared to lose money.
Yeah.
And you're going to lose money when you first start with any type of paid advertising, unless you already know what you're doing. It just takes, it's part of the game. It takes a little bit to get used to it.
Somebody with no background on that, how long did it take you?
I'm a huge believer in the fact that you can learn anything online.
Yeah.
So for the last 10 years, I've just been studying all that on my own time.
Yeah.
And even when I had a job before, I would take a little bit of my paycheck and spend it on ads. And I didn't even have a company. I would just spend it just to see how it worked and try and figure out, tweak with it a little bit and figure out what was going on. So I have a good amount of experience in it, actually. But I would say for somebody who's just starting out, there's a bunch of great information online that you can find.
Do you have any good resources you can share? Any good folks that you think are good?
Yeah, there's some great Facebook groups. So one of them is called Ad Leaks. There's Facebook Ad Buyers. There's a guy named Josh Fetcher who's doing a really amazing job. And his company is called Badass Marketers and Founders.
Okay.
So look all them up. There's a company called Founder as well. Founder is amazing. They started out with just an Instagram account, and they built it up to a million or maybe even 5 million followers. And now it's this huge company, and they teach people how to advertise online, how to run your business.
This is gold, by the way. This is all. Thanks for sharing all this.
Yeah, no problem. This is all stuff that I still read all the time.
Yeah. That's important. So you never stop learning. It's not like you've learned something and now you have to stay on top of it because things change, and in order to be able to continue to grow your business, you have to keep learning.
Yeah, that's honestly the most important thing. If you're not reading constantly, and that's the great thing about the internet is you just type something in or subscribe to a blog and you get it thrown at you. It's not like you have to go out of your way. You don't have to leave your pajamas. But yeah, just constantly reading. I would say sign up for a bunch of email lists.
Okay.
And it gets to be kind of annoying after a while, but I don't have to do anything. I just get emails from 5 different guys once a week, and I read those posts that they send out, and I'm learning new stuff.
That's awesome.
So yeah, do all that. And if you're just starting out, I would honestly say it wouldn't take more than a month for you to be able to get comfortable enough for you to actually dig in and start spending a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be good at it. You're not going to be good at it for at least 6 months or a year,
Okay.
but you can figure it out enough to where you're able to, get a return on your investment and stuff like that.
Okay.
But yeah, it's all just trial and error.
Do you have a wait list now that you've generated, or how long is the wait for a truck?
Yeah, so right now we're 12 months out, and
Okay.
we're booking people for the end of 2019 and 2020 for trucks.
Wow. If somebody's interested, what's the deposit for one of these?
It's 25% down.
25%. So that starts at $30,000.
Yep.
Got it. Cool. What's the craziest request you've ever gotten for a car?
Well, honestly, some of the stuff we're building now.
Yeah, you showed me one of them.
Yeah.
It's a 4-door truck, basically.
Yeah. So, I told you that it all evolved out of my kind of struggles with these original restored vehicles. A lot of it also evolved just from customers asking the stuff that I never even thought about, And one of my customers, he's an awesome guy. He races Baja and just does all this crazy stuff. He builds these tricked out Polaris Razors, the UTVs, and races those. So he's heavily into all the off-roading and all the off-road racing. And he came at us with just a ton of stuff he wanted. And that's that 4-door that you saw in the shop. So
he's going to race that thing.
I don't know what he's going to do with it. Honestly, I hope he doesn't kill it.
Wow.
I'm kind of scared of that guy.
Oh, man. I'm going to put on our Instagram stories a thing. I'm going to take it because it's a wild-looking vehicle. Wow.
Yeah. I can't wait till I can build one of those for myself, honestly.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
You don't currently drive one of these?
No, I'm getting to the point where
where you can afford it.
Yeah, hopefully, hopefully in the next year or two.
Yeah.
That's the funny thing too, is everybody thinks just because our trucks are, $120,000 or $250,000 that I'm like driving around in a Rolls Royce and partying and just living this amazing life. Like, no, I really just live at the shop and build these trucks and that's it,
Yeah. And that particular truck, that's a $250,000 truck, right?
Yeah, that one's $250,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a Hunter with 4 doors, basically?
Yep. That's got the book thrown at it. I couldn't think of anything else for us to put into it.
What color is it?
That one I think is going to be Dune Beige.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, it's going to be sweet.
That's cool. Where can people find you? What are your social media, your website, your properties? What are the ways in which people can get in touch with you?
It's all Black Dog Traders. So it's blackdogtraders.com is the website. You can check out all the stuff we do.
Okay.
Our YouTube, there's links to it on our website. So if you click on any of the links on our website, the videos, you'll go to our YouTube channel. Instagram and Facebook is all at Black Dog Traders.
Cool. Actually, there's one signature question that we ask on every episode, and before we sign off, you've shared a lot of lessons already, but what is the number one lesson if you had to think of something that you would share with people who are thinking about starting a business or starting a business and struggling with it?
I would just say that you have to be dedicated and honestly, truly interested in business to make it work, right? Like there's a lot of people who love, like let's say making wallets, but they don't know anything about business and they don't like business. I love business. So I love all the technical aspects of everything. I love, making the builds more efficient, things like that. If you're not into that, then find somebody who is, or at least somebody who can help you with that aspect of it.
Yep.
Because that's really important. There's people out there who build these amazing things, but they don't know how to run a business and they don't know how to find customers or do anything like that. And I don't care how amazing your wallet is or your boots or whatever it is you're making, if you don't know how to run a business, you're never gonna figure that out.
But you can learn. The university of the internet.
That's exactly, yeah. But you gotta be interested in that enough to actually spend hours and hours and hours researching it all
and sucking at it before you get better.
Yeah.
Austin Peterson, founder of Black Dog Traders. Thank you so much for sharing your story today on Small Business War Stories.
No, thank you for coming by, man. Honestly, it was great meeting you.
And nice to meet you as well. Small Business War Stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes.